And not a single woman has entered the Madrid Fire Department entrance exams. Is this the equality we're looking for? That's what I'm saying. Some may have applied, but it's likely no man 1.60 meters tall has passed Madrid firefighter exams.
Do women earn less than men for the same work? That argument was repeatedly used to justify later outrageous actions. Feminists no longer mention that statistic, as it's been thoroughly debunked. Will another wave of feminism happen in a few years? I think so. They're now tired, scattered, unmotivated, and divided. And in a few years, they're going to find a new enemy to attack again.
I can't wait for feminists to have the guts to criticize the Islamic patriarchy or the Arab patriarchy, just like they do with the white Christian Orthodox patriarchal church.
We have to start from the fact that feminists don't care about equality. I mean, they're not fighting for equality, it's all just talk. Men make up 86% of the homeless, while women who become homeless typically remain so only briefly. They can quickly access support, understanding, and social empathy that men lack. Why are rapists rapists? Because they're men. Actually, most men aren't rapists. It's like saying most cancer patients are elderly, but most elderly people don't have cancer, right?
Hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of LA Factoria. Today our special guest is Valentina Ortiz, creator of the channel La Entropía de Valen. She has been doing activism against feminism for more than 9 years, and honestly, it's a pleasure to have her here with us. How are you, Valen? How are you doing?
Thank you for the invitation and for making the most of this quick trip.
Yes, gentlemen, I need to say something. Valen isn't going. Well, as you could see, in the end, he couldn't come to Red Pill. We decided it was better for him to come here to LA Factoria because there weren't many feminists to debate with. It's a topic that we're going to discuss at length. About why it's so complicated to find people who defend feminism, who are open to debate and so on. I'll ask what interests me most and what I think will interest the audience most. Valen, why did you decide to start a channel 9 years ago when it was still, 9 years ago, not now? Has much been gained in the culture war? What motivated you to put yourself out there? To make a channel against feminism?
At first, I didn't know what I was getting into. When I started from the point of view of wanting to have a space where I could express all my disagreements with what I was seeing. And honestly, I didn't know to what extent I was going to have to deal with it. The controversy of being one of the first Spanish-speaking channel, and among the earliest overall dedicated to that. It just happened. In general, I made 3 or 4 videos on other topics, and when I made the first one criticizing feminism, I realized there was a latent need for that kind of criticism. There were a lot of people who needed that cathartic act of having someone else express what maybe they couldn't express in other contexts. And on one hand, I realized that, of course, on one hand, it's a cathartic exercise. Many people said they needed to hear a woman say this so they wouldn't feel suicidal. Seeing that this is becoming something and is kind of hijacking the minds of a lot of women at a rapid pace. And on the other hand, wasn't there a counterculture, which is what we have now? As I always say, it's good this debate is finally less taboo. People are no longer afraid to say what they think about feminism. At that time, there was a lot of fear, and we all saw it. People were terrified to freely express what they really thought about this.
Absolutely, Valen, but can you imagine a Red Pill podcast 9 years ago?
Years ago, possible?
I don't think it would have been possible. I want to thank you and many other people who were pioneers in making this criticism of feminism, because there was a time back around 2016 when it seemed like saying anything against feminism was literally, unthinkable. Wishing death on all women. I don't even have words to express how that movement behaved toward those who dared to be critical of it. So anyway, I really appreciate your courage. And what was it that drove you? How did you know how to recognize that underlying need you were talking about?
To begin with, I was born into a super progressive family in every way.
Speaking.
I'm from Argentina and my family is Argentine. My grandmother was Spanish, but the rest of my immediate family is from Argentina. And they've always been Kirchnerists, Peronists. Wow.
I wasn't expecting that, huh?
Feminists? I even turned mom around. That's true.
That's quite an achievement, gentlemen.
I, like many women of my generation, thought if feminism means equality, then I'm a feminist. There's not much else to consider. When I decided to get more involved and dig a little deeper, that's when I realized all the gaps that existed. The more answers I searched for, the more questions arose. It was the exact opposite of what I expected. I remember that was the turning point. The first click was hearing feminists say that they didn't want feminist demonstrations to be mixed, that men shouldn't participate. And I said, wait a minute, because how are we going to seek equality? It's a position that excludes. How are you going to exclude 50% of the population from a demand that theoretically includes them? Them too? That was just the start. The more I dug, the more outrageous things I found. And I said, this is absolutely not for me. And at that time, with all the shame there was, you couldn't even say, I'm anti-feminist. There wasn't even such a way to think of yourself. If feminism is about equality, then I'm a dissident feminist. I support equality, but not the methods. And then, little by little, you start opening Pandora's box and you say, no, wait a minute. Feminism, on one hand, the first point is that it's not the only way to seek equality, and then actually feminism is not the way to seek equality. I say I'm anti-feminist not out of opposition to equality, but because I support it. It's actually the opposite.
But I have an important question I always ask feminists, and now I'll ask you. Why is equality desirable? I know legal equality should exist in any democracy, but why is equality desirable? I don't see it. I actually think it's counterproductive for a prosperous society.
Isn't it? That's the point. What may be desirable is equality of rights and opportunities, which comes with equality of responsibilities, also associated with those rights and opportunities. But equality as an outcome, I mean, there's what's called substantive equality, right? What is that? Men and women can have the same rights and opportunities, and from there, it will be your merit, your will, and what you can prove. That's what will determine whether or not there can be the same outcomes. But equality of outcomes is not only undesirable, but as you said, it's counterproductive. To achieve equality of outcomes, we must begin with unequal basic rights and opportunities. That's the big problem with gender quotas, with parity quotas. In order to achieve them, I often use the fire department in Barcelona as an example, where they reserved, last time I checked, 40% of the positions were reserved only for women, and the rest, right? That means 60% of the positions were for men. The remaining 60% was for anyone, including women, but 40% had to be filled by women specifically. So on one hand, we have several problems, right? On one hand, the fact that in that process, you're discarding a lot of men who would probably be much more suitable for those positions and who are going to be displaced solely because they're men. At that point, is just being chosen for being women.
And inequality, of course.
This happens just for being men. Even if more qualified, they're still dismissed. And on the other hand, those women who could really prove their merits and reach the same standards that should be demonstrated in order to be qualified to do something like this. They will always be suspected of having gotten in through a spot, through a quota.
And this?
What problem do we find, right? Due to varying standards, state law enforcement and security forces have separate standards for men and women. To give an example, we have a dilemma, and that is if the standards set for women, which are lower, are enough to perform those jobs that are very risky and where you have other people's lives in your hands. So does the fact that you set higher standards for men work against those men who would be able to meet the women's standards, but not the men's? I mean, you could have a man who can easily surpass the standard set for women, but who doesn't reach the men's standard. That man is going to be rejected.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that only those who meet the set standards should get those jobs, whether they're men or women. So
they should have the same ones?
Exactly, no.
You tried, and I'm sorry. We can't change reality just so you feel better about not reaching that goal.
Yes, it is what it is. Feminists complain because recently I saw, maybe on Next, a girl posted just no women passed the Madrid Fire Department entrance exams. This is the equality we seek. I'm sure some have applied, but I doubt any man who's 5'3" has gotten into the firefighter exams in Madrid. Exactly. So what now? Should we start saying there aren't enough people with blue eyes or curly hair? If we look for that kind of equality in absolutely everything, we can reduce it to the absurd and end up with dichotomies like the one I just mentioned. Valentina, don't you think that at the end of the day, feminism is really nowadays an almost dying movement?
Yes, absolutely. It's dying. And this, well, I think it's obvious. At the time when I started, you couldn't say absolutely anything. It was like that.
When did you start? So people know? 2016, right? Donald Trump had just won the presidency, and all the woke left and the social justice warriors, as I call them, the legendary Pokemons, were super riled up.
I remember, and this is something I'll never forget. I was at a bus stop in Argentina. I was in Argentina at that time. Then I went to Spain. Then I came back. But I was at a bus stop in Argentina. And there were two women talking about the patriarchy. Two women in their 50s. Caros, what we call Caros in Spain, Karens.
In the United States, Karens?
Absolute chaos. Complaining about the patriarchy and everything. But I'm like, you hear it everywhere. How did this show up overnight? I had never heard people talk about the patriarchy in a casual conversation in my entire life. Suddenly, overnight, it became the main topic, and if you even considered questioning it, watch out. One of my first videos in the first, I don't know, let's call it season, was giving all the reasons we weren't living in a patriarchy. That video at the time was extremely controversial. How could you say that? People of all ages asked me about it, but now it's just, oh, of course, that's obvious. I mean, the fact that we've moved past that, well, the same thing happened with the wage gap. Back then, it was like that. You heard it everywhere, and it doesn't hold up over time. I mean, if you keep looking, you still find all those talks or articles, etc., that kept repeating the same mantra that women earn less than men for the same work. At the time, they used that argument over and over to defend the outrageous things they later did. And nowadays, feminists no longer dare to give that statistic because it's been more than debunked. They keep saying women earn less than men, but that's no longer true for the same work.
They no longer include it. It's been removed from their narrative. It's like they hand out a pamphlet to all the feminists and they repeat the same mantras without any kind of questioning or critical thinking behind it. It's
as if they'd said, is this it? Everyone knows it's a lie. So, from that point of view, I see that, of course, it's definitely going down. As it's going down, let's look at companies, for example. Companies are companies. We saw how all the March 8th or all the Pride Month, they would change their logo and put it in purple, or they'd put it with the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender flag and all that. And right now, this doesn't pay off anymore. We don't sell anything with it. They just return to their usual ways again. So yes, I think so that this was just a matter of time. Obviously, they were going to find that they were no longer able to keep it up any longer. And it's going to come back, I predicted. I'm saying it here.
What's coming back? Will it...
Is another feminist wave going to come back in a few years that's going to...
Why do you think that? I'll tell you, because I don't think so.
Obviously, it's not going to be the same. It keeps changing, the little monster. It keeps changing. But as we've seen throughout history, there have been waves of feminism that come and go, that lose strength and then pick it up again. I think it's repeating. They're doing it now. Tired, that they are scattered, that they are unmotivated, that they are divided. In a few years, they'll find another enemy to attack. So I don't know. That's true. Now, you and I are here talking freely about this. Just like you were able to do the Red Pill podcast, I was able to make my channel reach more people in a few years from now. They're going to say, well, these are the misogynists we were fighting against and that you refused to see. And a new trend will come back, but of course, it will come renewed. It will be other people. They'll defend other policies, swing back and forth like a pendulum. That's just how it is.
What happens? I have a theory that's a bit different from yours. Europe has an extremely big birth rate crisis. I think that what's really coming in Europe is a kind of demographic majority of people from Muslim culture, well, of Arab culture and Islam. I think that in Europe, patriarchy won't come from Western Christians, but it might come from Muslims. And honestly, I can't wait for feminists to have the guts to criticize Islamic patriarchy or Arab patriarchy, just like they do with the white Christian Orthodox patriarchal church. That's a dichotomy that I don't know. What do you think about it? To me, it seems like a bad joke. As always, the focus is put on the Western white man as the source of all evil and the cause of all the problems that have occurred in human history. However, both slavery and patriarchy and everything else. And yet when you start studying a bit of history, you realize that's not the case. That nowadays, the strongest patriarchy that exists is not in countries that are Western Christian.
You have to realize that feminists aren't actually fighting for equality. It's just talk. So is what you're predicting going to happen? And being at the peak of ideological positioning just to take a stance from some sort of moral superiority where they can tell others how they should act and based on that achieve their businesses and their ongoing schemes. This will all continue to happen. They are going to be immersed in that situation, and from that place they are going to transform you. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They are going to transform you. What they call equality isn't, because equality means something else, right? Well, actually, the person who wears the veil does so because it's part of their freedom. And we can't tell those women how they have to live because that's cultural appropriation. If you were there, I imagine you...
No, but that's literally the argument they have.
Exactly. And in the future, they're going to say, well, you were defending. Before, if a woman wanted to be a trad wife, she could be a trad wife. Why can't she now be the wife of an Islamic imam? So are they going to start defending equality? From there, you say there's no backbone, in a sense, theoretical foundation to support what they're defending. In fact, something I say very often is that theory must be supported by evidence, not evidence by theory. They ask for evidence of the patriarchy and then provide an example. Is it because women often take caregiving roles that they earn less? In child custody disputes, well, if we're talking about child custody disputes, when there's a custody dispute, there are two parties interested in having custody of the children. The fact that women end up receiving custody is a benefit. It's a privilege for women. It's not a form of oppression or discrimination against them. Quite the opposite. So they're always going to find their argument is so closed off that they're always going to find a way for reality to fit what they basically want to believe. So what if we turned it around? To begin with, obviously if there's a custody dispute, the one who benefits is the one who wins, not the one who loses. So you can't tell me that you win custody disputes. And then it's actually because this happens because they expect us to care for the children. If you don't want to, don't fight for custody. Let the father have it. But if you are fighting, it's because you want to care for them. Theoretically, if we turn it around, honestly, if we want to play the victim game, let's say men never get custody because they see them as walking ATMs. They don't see them as capable of raising their children properly. So if we want to play that game, we all know how to play it. 1.
Question, Valentina, have you read Esther Willer? Yes, what do you think of Esther Willer? I think she does something like I think the Tamed Man is a joke because I think the way she turns everything around is super subtle. The story of the patriarchy describes a matriarchy where the man is the one being tamed. And it really doesn't hold up. It's like the same argument feminists use, but the other way around. Everything can be turned around. Can we really say that the one who has suffered oppression is the man? What do you think about Esther Villar? And what do you think about that false narrative of the patriarchy? That really? It shows that men have always held a privileged position over women. When I ask many women today if they'd rather be a man or a woman in 1900 France, anyone who says they'd rather be a man hasn't read about Verdun. Really? I believe men have faced more oppression in history, not from women, but from society. I think what men have experienced has always been the most dramatic part of history.
And that, obviously, to begin with, if I get into that mess, we could end up talking here for 6 hours, but...
I'll answer Esther's question first.
Villar. Esther Villar. One thing we have to acknowledge is that she was the first to come... Me on YouTube. In 2016, that was nothing. Esther Villar truly shook things up.
1972, an honor to Esther Villar.
Then, I'm not sure if you read it. The Tamed Man is best known, but did you read the second one? The brother of...
The Polygamous Man. I still have 50 pages left of The Tamed Man because I'm juggling 3 books and can't keep up. I read a little bit of it before bed because it puts me in a bad mood. Also because Esther Villar is a book that at the end of the day puts me in a bad mood because I think about what I'm reading. I hope that in the end she tells me this was just a test. That the feminist discourse, I'm doing the opposite. I'm kind of ridiculing it, mirroring the feminist discourse to nothing, surrounded by people without ambition, waiting for something to change. Things only change when you take control of your life and choose the right people to be around. That's why I started Club Red Pill 3.0. A space designed for men who want to surround themselves with real warriors. A space where we cover key topics like masculinity, stoicism, relationships, and couple dynamics. Where we try to give you the necessary tools so you can reach your maximum potential, keep improving every day, and become the man that this society so desperately needs. Additionally, by joining, you get access to an exclusive section where you can ask questions to the guests of the factory and learn directly from the leading figures in the industry. If you want to be part of the community, I'll leave the link in the pinned comment. Let's continue with the OSO podcast.
Subtitled by Jay and Coyle.
Subtitled by Jay and Coyle.
Me, the fun part about being able to see both perspectives and compare how much we can fall victim to a constant mental trap. You can turn everything around. That's where the importance comes in. We have to remember the importance of having criteria, not just being there with our legs open, willing to accept whatever we're given. And if it sounds kind of nice, if it sort of makes sense, we immediately buy into it. We end up being kidnapped by the ideology of the moment. It's others who know how to see those traps where our minds can be co-opted, where they benefit. Now regarding the other thing you mentioned, that it has always been men who have been in a more oppressive role. Let's say, not just from women, but in general.
Yes, on a structural social level.
I think that's a yes, I agree. And also, it's a somewhat inevitable consequence of how we've developed and how we've managed to survive as a species and also spread over time. I'm unsure about recommending it since it's such a huge book. It's as big as The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, with the difference that it's not outdated like The Second Sex is. Dehumanizing the Male by Daniel Jimenez.
I'm going to read it.
This book is amazing because it covers humanity's history, practically from a point of view that's not the one we usually hear, and it's not something theoretical. It's not like, well, I think this happened to men. Maybe it's more like Esther Villa's perspective. But rather, it's very well documented, it's been thoroughly studied, and on top of that, it addresses human societies in general, not just Western society. It talks to you about how female power has been exercised throughout history. It's untrue that women lacked power before. They had power, just exercised differently. But for example, regarding the roles that men and women have had, does it have a lot to do with survival? It's mostly about so-called gender roles. Gender roles are a natural, expected consequence of how we have organized ourselves to survive in the most optimal way, of how we have managed to expand and progress as a species. If women set the reproductive limit, a man can father many babies in a year, but a woman can only have one pregnancy per year, so women set the reproductive limit. Protecting women originates from the idea that it's not in your best interest to run out of women. Is that a form of oppression or the opposite? Or are they valuing your life as a woman more than they're valuing men's lives?
Which I justify as a man. I mean, I understand it, I respect it. If we were
extinct, if we hadn't done...
Totally.
One thing is, let's say, an imposition. Nowadays, it wouldn't make any sense. But throughout history, it has been fundamental, it has been necessary, and it will continue to be necessary if we keep going down this path. To impose the opposite, to try to, how should I put it? To make people believe, to brainwash people, convincing them that the methods that have worked throughout history are a form of oppression. That a woman who wants to dedicate herself to her family and have children and be a housewife and get married, etc. Is she going against or betraying women? Well, that's exactly what ends up condemning us.
In fact, I'll tell you something. I'll double down. Living that way glorifies the lifestyle of women throughout history. It's about reclaiming what it means to be a woman, not attacking women today.
You should be grateful, that's my point. Historically, it's men who've given their lives for society's progress. That's where the concept comes in from the branch of the men's rights activism movement. I'm very much against it turning into something like the ultra-victimizing feminism we see today, but it does have very valid claims about male disposability. This concept that throughout history we've needed men to risk their lives in many aspects, in many circumstances, and when gender liberation movements, equality movements, and so on arise, they always forget that half. where they do want gender quotas in those desirable positions, in political positions, in the leadership of big companies, and so on. But there will never be quotas in the usual things.
In front of Ukraine,
On the front lines of armed conflicts, you will never see it. In jobs that involve paving roads at 50 degrees under the sun, dying from heat stroke, working 150 meters up, cleaning the windows of a building, they will never include the hardest work inside a mine. They will never include it. I remember when the fishing boats sank here, I don't remember the name, several years ago in Galicia. After that, a campaign started when they realized how few women there were in the fishing industry. They set quotas. Where did they set quotas? On the boats, women went there to die, not in management roles. Women are not going to get on a boat to offer themselves,
their lives to
risk their lives to be able to get food for the whole population. And that's the case in many aspects. So it's men who have historically given their lives, it's men who have risked their lives. Are men the ones who have been convinced to take on that role in exchange for a mention in a history book, for a statue? In a place where the greater your willingness to die, the bigger the medal you'll receive. Yet today, women claim they've been oppressed throughout history, excuse me. So was it really comfortable to be a woman in the past? And obviously we're talking, for example, about the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, we could say that no, women didn't have freedom. But put yourself in the Middle Ages. Let's take a second to consider the context of the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, with your freedom, you couldn't do much. You'd get to the corner and maybe die, and yet your safety was very important. So, was it worth it, as a woman, quote unquote, to give up part of your freedom in exchange for a safety that was much more important? Freedom was useless to you, safety was fundamental. So throughout history, it has always been women who have had that privileged role because their lives have been valued more.
The truth is what you just told me, because for me that's a thought I had never structured in those words before. I really liked it. Freedom meant little, but security was much more valuable. That's the truth. But are they worth it? Knowing that this whole story already, thank God people like us are gaining more and more ground, and feminism is looking more and more cornered. I haven't been able to reach you. Feminist for Red Pill.
What a shame.
We're going to touch on a very important topic. Don't you think feminism has really ruined a generation? Here in Spain, cargar means to destroy.
Destroy the
Mind of a whole generation of women. Yes, yes.
Yes, yes. And that's why I also think we have to, that's our role, right? To try to be a little kinder when it comes to understanding what
has happened. Because
there are a lot of women who are now reaching adulthood. They are a deceived generation, a generation that was sold something that wasn't real. Because maybe, out of ignorance, out of their kindness, their good intentions, they thought they were defending something that seemed fair to them. That's fine. Sure, information is always available, but would you really ask a 14 or 15-year-old girl to go against the current? To question what she was being told everywhere, to doubt what they told her even at her school, to look for information elsewhere from other sources? Some people might have managed it. As for me, what do I know? I caught on a little later, but I was able to be part of that exception. And most women are victims. I mean, young women, right? From that generation, not the Irene Montero types, are they victims? Absolutely.
I agree totally.
With that trend? So are they now starting to realize the years of their lives they've wasted, the stupid things they've said, what they've stood up for? They want to redeem themselves in some way. They want to be able to give themselves. We have to give them that chance. We have to allow them to come out of the ideological closet, right? And say, hey, look, I've been defending absolute nonsense all these years. Without us jumping at their throat right away and saying, oh, what an idiot, look at what you were defending. Because if we don't, we won't be able to do anything more than what feminism has already done all these years. So that's where we need to be kind and say, well, you realized it, you saw it, come here, you changed your mind, come closer, it's okay. Everyone has the right to make mistakes. Now, what we do ask of you, please, is don't keep saying those outrageous things. Don't keep defending what you've been defending until now. Yes.
But the friction that generation caused between men and women, do you think it can be fixed? Because I don't. I believe and I stand by the idea that a man needs to have certain standards when it comes to marriage. I'm a conservative man. I'm not that liberal.
I know, really.
I think there's a generation that's practically beyond saving. I don't think they're fit for marriage. And I don't think a real man with a future, with prospects, with self-confidence, who loves himself, would want a woman who has bought into the feminist narrative when it comes to sexual liberation, for example. The thing is, nowadays we have generations that have gone from women like our grandmothers who got married and only ever knew their man. We've moved on to, okay, I'm going to experiment a little, which I don't think is entirely bad either. Well, we've moved on to a generation of women who have really bought into the idea that OnlyFans is empowerment, who have bought into that narrative that sleeping with a guy one weekend, yes, one weekend, no, is something totally acceptable. And they really don't understand how the male mind works when it comes to choosing a partner. Do you think that generation can be saved? Look,
I'm going to share several points. When you say that, 5 things come to mind. On one hand, I think there's the issue from the perspective of liberalism and not trying to infantilize women, like feminism does. It's true that there are a lot of women who make these kinds of decisions in a totally and absolutely impulsive way, without thinking about their future, without thinking about what they will want in 5 years, 10 years, 5 years, or what are they really looking for, or if it's anything at all, not just a matter of quick benefit. But it's also true that I think that, like me, one of the things I point out about feminism is this constant chronic infantilization they do to women, of trying to kidnap and tell them of exercising that fatherly role, telling them what they have to do in the case of feminism. I believe that as long as a woman is making that decision, being aware of what the consequences are, what the risks are, what the other part she has to take on is, a woman working on OnlyFans, in my view, must be fully aware. Just as she's free to have an OnlyFans, others are free to choose who they want to be with. What if you suddenly like a guy who, based on his values, wouldn't date a woman with an OnlyFans? He's completely within his rights, and you also can't go around demanding that others change all their morals, all their values, just so you can feel like you can have it all. Look, maybe you can't have it all, and that's okay. I mean, if you decided to have an OnlyFans and you're really sure about your decision and the choice you made, and are you aware of weighing the pros and cons? What it can offer you and what you could lose in the process, and you still choose it? Sweetie, that's great. Do what you want with your life. I won't stop you. Put yourself first now. Don't expect to change what others want, because that's not going to happen.
you can't change it. I agree, but now you can.
The other branch did this for you. I won't forget.
Come on, more.
That worries me, especially since over there you say these people will find each other. Would you not date a woman who had an OnlyFans? No.
No, I'm worse. OnlyFans is already too much for me. I wouldn't marry a woman who slept with 10 men.
So, you wouldn't sleep with a woman who's been with 10 men. Some people refuse to sleep with women who have or had an OnlyFans. If that woman is even slightly aware, she'd probably say no. I also can't be with someone who thinks this about me because that's not who I am. Because I can't be someone I'm not. So, in the end, that might be something that's harmless up to a certain point, because after all, everyone is just being themselves, right? I mean, you meet people you have a certain connection with. What would worry me more, for example, is the issue of false accusations. That is, there's a generation that has been taught that any little thing is violence, is mistreatment, is abuse. Are they truly convinced? It's not as if they willingly file a false accusation against you. It's just that in a moment during a couple's argument, she said absolutely terrible things to you and you said, okay, that's enough, that's it. She says, he yelled and was violent, so I'll file a gender violence complaint. And you end up spending 72 hours in the cell if I report you on a Friday because of the laws that prevail nowadays. Spain, you don't have equal rights and opportunities before the law with that person. Your presumption of innocence doesn't exist. So that's where we really get into murky territory, where a woman who might even consider herself very conservative in her daily life still deep down has this ingrained. That virus where she learned everything is
Violence, everything is violence.
You might think it's normal to report violence if it happens to you. I don't trust those who
Make false accusations?
I experienced real violence, and that's what it's like. Didn't you realize you said awful things to your partner in an argument, but didn't see that as violence? And the moment he got tired and raised his voice a little, did you feel attacked, report him, and ruin his life? So that's where I think there's a lost generation, where it's very difficult. If I were a man, I would be very wary when meeting a woman from this.
I tell men that if a woman says she's a feminist, you must either join her in fighting what I call mental cancer or risk ending up in these situations. But I have found
Chota, I'm going to generate a lot.
fear. But cases,
of women who presented themselves as the complete opposite, who didn't. I'm not a feminist. I don't know how much, because of course it's embarrassing. I mean, I would be embarrassed to say things like that I'm a feminist. But thank you very much.
Hired. I liked it.
Suddenly, that's what happens in a couple's argument. Oh, didn't he raise his voice at me a little bit? They report the guy, and you ask, weren't you not a feminist? Can you really not be one? You just say it for show, skipping the March 8th rally, not wearing purple, shaving your armpits. So what do you actually do? You falsely accuse him, calling even trivial things violent, stuff that might have just crossed your mind. That's when it gets scary. Then what do I know too? Lost generation, yes, there are a lot of people who are lost, and that's what it brings. What is lost is trust. What is lost is hope. What is lost is this bond that we can have between men and women, knowing that we can rely on each other, and that the next morning the switch won't be flipped. The feminist ideas she learned in secondary school will make her see it as violence. Crazy, right? She plans to file a false report to ruin your career, but many women have been helped and have recovered. And I remember I often get messages from women who told me thank you because your channel made me see a lot of things. In fact, I'm preparing a video that has a bit more of a hopeful tone about women who changed, moving away from extreme misandrous feminism and that intense hatred of men. And who were able to see the light, let's put it that way, they were able to see the other side. Some people can be brought back. Joda, did you see me at 15? I was a totally different person. But of course, that's the issue when ideological trends, as criminal as feminism, try to appeal to teenagers, because teenagers don't even have a fully developed brain. They buy into whatever sounds revolutionary to them. They buy into whatever gives them a sense of identity that makes them feel superior to what they consider the establishment. So they buy into anything. I was the same way at 15, it's typical. I hadn't had a job. I hadn't lived real life. I didn't manage my own money. I didn't earn my own money. You always just use words to stand up for things. So, can I see myself in all those little girls? I mean, changing the ideological trend, because in my time it was, I don't know, oh no. And what about capital? And heavy metal. Did you see me at Plaza España? I don't know if you knew. Yes, I am.
From Madrid, I know those.
Yoda, I was there. Did you see me? In 2011, I was at Plaza España, wearing heavy metal t-shirts that said down with capital. And then, of course, at 17, I started working, became independent, and faced real life. That's when you truly finish developing and become a functional adult, if you're fortunate enough to get it together, since many people are left behind. But I think there's a point of hope for the mental recovery of some. Me too.
I believe it too, but we must also win this battle for future generations. And I'm really scared by the fact that this ideology is being imposed in schools. It's just that we see more and more videos practically every time. I'm going to give a shout out to those girls here. If anyone watching this video knows them or something, tell them we've mentioned them here. The other day it showed up, well, like a month or two ago, a pretty viral video showed up of two girls standing up to the instructor who had come to give a talk about gender inequality in the workplace. The two girls stood up and said, I can't do the same job as a man. I lack a man's strength. When I was in public high school, this kind of talk was unthinkable. Most women and nearly all girls of my generation who went to high school bought into the narrative.
Those girls, especially the one who talked most in that video.
He interviewed her.
Expert on equality on his channel. There's an interview, this girl who is wonderful. And I had the chance to send her a little message through his channel so she could see it and I could thank her, telling her that they are braver.
Girls.
Like them, who are managing to break that pattern right there in those places. Because they thought at one point that they were going to manage to hijack their minds in the schools. For a while they managed, but then realized they couldn't have that place or fully take away their judgment and ideological independence. They started to emerge, well, they could control the mainstream media, but YouTube channels started to appear. They began hearing an unexpected narrative. Suddenly, in schools, they started bringing in equality agents and showing slides with UTBH's face, telling them no. Are these the ones spreading misogyny online? Don't trust anything they say, they're lying.
UTBH, who I get along with but find annoying, only criticizes a small part of feminism, you know? I get that they call me an old-fashioned conservative, but come on. Just imagine calling UTBH a radical. I mean, come on, this is already a bad joke. Shout out to Sergio. I care about you. Next.
The kids go on the internet and listen to what UTBH has to say. What you have to say, what I have to say, what a lot of people have to say. For me,
They put me on a sign. Sorry to interrupt you. The other day in the Basque country, they put my face on a sign for 8M with the mic. I love it. In the series, we're doing something right.
I made them scrap a whole Gen Place episode and not publish it because they invited me. Yes, I have.
The photos and everything. I mean, and they didn't publish it. No, they didn't publish it. That's good. Go on, Valen. And
They couldn't handle that either, right?
they didn't.
It didn't help to point them out directly by name and surname or by the name of their channels in class. They hid them from the kids, but the kids still saw them and realized these people provide more information and hard data. I'm not just giving lip service, I'm presenting actual evidence and data to support our statements. And that in their schools, they didn't do that. For example, 2 papers have already been dedicated to me, one in Spain and one in Argentina, by feminists.
In
At the Reina Sofia Institute, they did an academic study in heavy quotation marks where they evaluate my channel and evaluate the anti-feminist women on the internet and the harm we cause to let me
guess the study's outcome. Are you a pick-me? Yes.
pick me what?
Disgusting, really? Pick-me diagnosis, right? That's how the study ended?
It was a disaster. This is typical. Let's justify the budget and claim it's not. We did a study that shows these people are crap. But they were tables, like, I swear, I mean, this looks like the SS. They made tables in the paper. There are tables where they put, for example, person, right? Valentina Ortiz main YouTube channel name, Valen's Entropy Additional Networks, Valen Unfiltered, Valen's Entropy. I don't know what. On Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, etc. They list relationships, collaborators, and more. She was with UTVH, she was with Roberto Vaquero, she was with Jota from Red Pill. Dude.
At that point, you're out. On feminism, they list
Number of followers. They list. I mean, and this is just to say, well, these are the women. Look at who we defend. How great that women need to be heard and empowered. Well, not these ones. These are the ones you shouldn't let fall asleep. It's
like Vale, amazing. They do studies and label you as dangerous just based on who you associate with.
And I'll tell you the worst part. The Reina Sofia Institute, I mean, that study was from the Reina Sofia Institute, which had a stamp from the Ministry of Equality. I mean, they use public money to make a little chart explaining why my channel is dangerous. Wow, what?
How harsh, Vale. I just find it surreal. I want to move on already because it's totally surreal. I want to ask you a very important question. Earlier, at the beginning of the show, we said that it's very hard to find feminists, especially those who are prepared, those who are educated, those who are supposed to be the main spokespersons of the regime. Don't they want to get rid of it? Debate, but you do find allies, better night men, who are willing to debate. Tell me, what's your experience with them? What do you think of them? Because I have a theory that I'll tell you at the end of your reflection.
Well, it's true that they're the only ones so far who have accepted debates with me. I don't know why. Well, once a girl accepted a debate with me, but then she ended up blocking me the usual. But the only ones who accept debates with me are allies. I have 2 main ideas about why they're allies. The first one is the simplest, the most obvious, the one everyone might think of, and it's that they're trying to show off. They want to hook up, they'll do anything to get close to a woman, it doesn't matter which woman it is. The other one is that they did something wrong in the past. Are they somehow trying to overcorrect their behavior before the bad stuff they did comes out?
There's a third one, Valen, and it's that they're predators who disguise themselves as lambs waiting for their opportunity. Call him Rejon Monedero or Pablo Iglesias that.
We said it, of course. Are you surprised feminists in politics say, aren't all men disgusting? Look at who they surround themselves with. Normal?
That they think so. If you surround yourself with such silkworms, if you surround yourself with such slimy betonidas, then of course you'll think that men are like that. And
now it's something that can be proven, because they're coming out from underneath, from under the rocks, all the crap is coming out. I mean, you dug a little and it started to come out, but a few years ago it was just a matter of assuming it. I don't know what kind of men you've been hanging out with, because I've been surrounded by men my whole life and I don't have that kind of life experience. I can't relate because every woman has experienced that. No, it honestly never happened to me. That never happened to me. And I've always gotten along better with men. I actually have more male friends than female friends. I'm that kind of pick-me girl, and I've never ever been surrounded by that kind of disgusting, creepy guys. Who disrespect you? Quite the opposite. That's one thing. But regarding the debate, it's striking how the feminist discourse doesn't hold up for even a second. No, because with feminists, it's always no. You have to listen to and respect them, so how would you even mess with her? Is it because of what she says, her body, or something else? And those same guys are the ones who, when they start debating with me, fall into all the sins they point out in others. They always exclude themselves from that group, but when talking to an anti-feminist, they make the same mistakes. Don't men interrupt you? Well, they all interrupt you. Men explain things to you. Mansplaining.
Right? Manterrupting?
Mansplaining and every man thing you can imagine. They do them all.
All of them. Then,
right? But they shouldn't tell women how to think. Yet, you're telling me. And that's always what we were talking about before, right? About how we can always turn everything around. You can catch them with that argument. Weren't you the one who said you can't explain the experience to me? Life as a woman? Don't explain. I know it better. Shut up. No, not that.
I'll tell you something. It may seem like I often tell women how to live or act, but I believe in freedom and don't do that. I tell them about myself and explain that actions have consequences. And if you want a family lifestyle, there are certain attitudes that won't go along with you or help you achieve it. That's what I do. I do mansplaining. Yes, I do mansplaining because as the macho man that I am, I say what a macho man generally wants. But this isn't about saying behave this way regardless of what you want. It would never occur to me to tell a girl who says, I don't want to be a mother, I don't want this, I don't want that. Well, then behave the way a traditional man wants. Well, no, but I do tell both men and women what a traditional man or woman looks for in a relationship. But at the end of the day, Valen, I don't know what you think about that. Do you think feminism has impacted both traditional men and women? And that this is, in a way, a disadvantage for society, yes.
I think what's happening here is a matter of this is where I usually end up being hated by both sides, right? But I'm missing something.
I don't hate you. They're valid independently. It's
also a matter of ideological coherence. So, like we were saying a little earlier, right? If you're a woman who has an OnlyFans or whatever, you can't expect to end up with a super traditional guy. Why not? Because he's looking for something else. It's that simple. The same thing happens on the other side. I'm not sure why. If you're very traditional, those inconsistencies you mentioned don't happen in real life. We can theorize all we want, but it doesn't happen in real life. If you're a super traditional guy, then you're with a girl who's also super traditional. You're her first relationship, her first partner, and then you expect her to perform like a professional in the intimate aspect. That won't happen to you. It's the same. So I think in the end, it's always about taking responsibility for the decisions you make and what are the consequences associated with them. And in the same way, there could be a woman who, during a period of her life, had certain ideas, thought a certain way, had an alliance, I don't know. One day she had a mystical experience, found God, and changed completely. Many similar cases exist. I mean, the world
has room for everything. Yes, yes, yes. Those encounters with God often occur when you have 4 kids, are 35, and feel lonelier than ever. And you go to church to see if you can find a good man who will forgive you for your whole past. Well, but do you know if you are that man? Do you know
what happens? There are also a bunch of men who have been with millions of women their whole lives. They were always like that each weekend with someone new. I don't remember the name of the one I was with yesterday, etc. So a traditional woman with her whole traditional life would say, no, I don't want a guy like that. I mean, I don't trust him. I mean, I'm going to give him my whole life. I'm going to give him my best years. I'm going to give him children. I'm going to dedicate myself 100% to building a family with him, with the risk that this person might end up sleeping with his secretary tomorrow because he's been used to behaving like a womanizer his whole life. So,
also understandable
on that other side. But
I'll tell you something. It doesn't usually happen. A woman in love is more likely to forgive, and a man may forgive such behavior too, though I don't recommend men act that way. But
that's also generally where coherence is found. A man who has an education and has been super traditional all his life is more likely to meet a woman who has also been traditional all her life and has that same education. They will be more mutually compatible, they will feel more attracted to each other, and their values will align better. People who are on the opposite end of the spectrum will also be more attracted to each other for long-term relationships. We're not talking about those things we sometimes mention, about the thrill of seeking the opposite, right? And then there's also the woman who maybe throughout her whole life she lived in a certain way, and today she decides to change her life and devote herself to a more traditional lifestyle, which might be more compatible with a guy who also, for many years, was a real womanizer, someone no traditional woman would ever trust. Because in fact, the way I am, kind of in this lukewarm place where I can get along with people from all walks of life. I know a lot of friends who are super traditional in that sense, and they tell me that with a guy who used to live that way, of being the top dog and being with a different girl every weekend and acting like he can get any girl he wants, I just find them disgusting and would never be with a guy like that. So, well, maybe that kind of guy is a better match for the girl who, when she has 3 cats, realizes she wants a traditional life. That's it, Alan.
After all, the world.
Has room for everything. We can't go on like this. I mean, it's a
Good point. I expect coherence from women, but men should be held to the same standard. We can't use crude language either. You're not going to find a woman.
more virginal, more pure, and more devoted in your life if you behaved like that during your life is only logical. And that's why I also don't bother to point out men who are looking for a more traditional life. In fact, I'm pretty much outside of that debate because, above all, as I told you at the beginning, I consider myself liberal. I believe that as long as we can handle risks, benefits, harm, consequences, and accept the responsibilities that come with our freedoms, I don't dare to point fingers at someone who wants to live a traditional life, whether it's a man or a woman, because
I understand this.
it's a matter of consistency. Valen?
I came up with a question I wanted to ask you, and I've really been remembering some videos I've been watching, and it was a video in which an injured couple appeared in the middle of the highway, and the man was on the hood. Sorry, the woman was on the hood, and the man was trying to ask for help. The woman was leaning like this. Nobody stopped. The woman says to him, "Let me handle it." No, the man sits on the hood, the woman stands on the road to ask for help, and the first car that passes stops. Feminists might say this is patriarchy as they are defenseless. But don't you think that the fact that society is more willing to always help a woman than a man? Isn't it the opposite? Haven't women always held a privileged position as we discussed? Absolutely.
And this has several names, doesn't it? On one hand, there's the fact that they're two sides of the same coin. It's the empathy gap. There are a lot of different studies that have been done on this, which show that women have. That is, people tend to have more empathy for women in a situation than for men. If you ask people who they would be willing to save in a certain situation, women are always the ones who end up being saved. Yes, and this was also shown with examples related to traffic accidents and situations of social vulnerability in general. In fact, people always talk about the glass ceiling, right? About how women supposedly face complications when it comes to reaching high positions and so on. On one hand, that's mostly false, since it also depends on what you're willing to sacrifice. Men often sacrifice throughout their lives to achieve social mobility, which will generate greater economic security, economic stability that will allow him to provide and make himself valuable in his social context. And that's where they've shown willingness to travel, to work overtime, to take night shifts, to risk their lives in terms of jobs. When women don't accept those conditions, eventually the result is that they don't get those same positions. But when they're willing to sacrifice all that, it has been shown that not only do women get access, but they are even seen more favorably and get those positions more easily. But regarding the famous glass ceiling, the one that's been shattered, there's another part that isn't seen, which is the glass floor. If we want to call it the floor,
Of concrete, as I call it. Because they never go down to certain levels of society like penitentiaries and so on. Well,
and 86% of homeless people, this is the statistic for Spain, but you can look at other countries and the numbers are always similar. Are they men? However, women who end up homeless are homeless for a very short time. Quickly, they can access certain forms of help, understanding, and social empathy that men don't have. Whether it's from friends, family, or people around them who are willing to help them. Even public institutions are always more willing to help women in that situation than men. Even the few women who end up in that situation stay there for less time and get out of it much faster than men do. That's one thing. We could say that's where the empathy gap starts. and how, in general, society as a whole is more willing to lend a hand to women in difficult situations than to men. In that case, feminists might mention the patriarchy, though I'm not sure what exactly. In a video where there's a couple who had an accident and it's the woman who asks for help. When it's men, people just walk by. Generally speaking, they really don't care what might happen to them. However, when it comes to a woman, we have a predisposition that's partly natural, partly biological, partly evolutionary, and partly cultural. Also, because that behavior has been reinforced, the behavior of rescuing women over men has been rewarded, encouraging them to be helped. And that obviously is a benefit in favor of women, not a form of discrimination, not a form of oppression, quite the opposite. And this happens in every little aspect, in every little detail of life. We're talking about what happens in a situation where there's a couple involved in an accident. But we also see it with regard to the other counterpart, which is the concept of heroic masculinity. How have men been raised to be the rescuers, to be the ones who are available? So if they see a woman in a difficult situation, they go to help her. And you say, well, generally speaking, let's talk in evolutionary biological terms. Do men usually have more physical or biological advantages to be able to help a woman, to be able to rescue a woman in a difficult situation? Now, if we're talking about this, let's say, inequality of conditions, where you see an injured man and a completely healthy woman walks by, most likely that woman will end up ignoring him, even when she's in a position to help him, even when she has the ability to do so. We women haven't been taught to offer that emergency help the way men have been taught. Men, part of being a man, of not being a boy, of being a man, is being able to help a woman if she needs it. That doesn't happen in reverse. It's called the empathy gap. I understand.
Perfectly. Vala, I want to ask you a question. We're almost done, but I want to ask you a question that I think is very deep and the most relevant. What do you think is the greatest harm that feminism has caused to society? Look,
I think that, well, feminism itself, but it's an oxymoron. I can't answer you. That's how a definition came out. The
worst of feminism
has been feminism. But I think that this staunch defense of the patriarchy, of conceptualizing that we live in a patriarchy and that a patriarchy is inherently bad, and that everything that can arise from that conception has terrible consequences. Because what it means to defend that we live in a patriarchal society is to understand that women are in some way second-class citizens and that they are subordinated to the power of men. That men act as a homogeneous group, as if they were a monolithic entity that shares everything. In reality, that makes it harder for us to analyze the situation in a way that helps identify the causes of problems and find solutions. It also prevents us at the same time from generating an interaction, a connection that allows us to clarify things, to build together instead of continuing to divide. The concept of patriarchy, in which women are always seen as the victims of oppression and men are always seen as the oppressors. It prevents us from being able to observe those situations where men are systematically disadvantaged and where women have a position of privilege. Let's say, doesn't it fit in a patriarchal context like the one feminists defend? That there are men who are victims of false accusations, victims of abuse, women who abuse power, who take advantage of policies that initially consider them victims. Because of this, in the end, it always ends up being the beginning of the problem, the root of the problem. Laws are created that assume women are always in a situation of vulnerability and oppression over men. And since reality isn't like that, and reality doesn't match that premise, obviously there will be women who use these resources offered by institutions to increase, perpetuate, and further accentuate some situations that men are experiencing. That is, if all women were good and victims, if everything were as feminism claims, there wouldn't be men beaten by their wives who have nowhere to turn. There wouldn't be men who are falsely accused of violence or abuse. None of this would exist. These things keep happening and now affect the very men who once defended it, who are now being consumed by the same monster they once fed, right? So I think the root of the biggest problem caused by feminism is creating this distortion. Because when we're unable to properly identify the problems, we're also unable to properly identify the solutions. We're not. I mean, it's the same thing we were talking about with this massive immigration, with this cultural issue that's happening. Where they come from, certain cultures that clearly don't have the notions of respect for women that we do, and that feminism denies. Suddenly, it turns out that everything we've built, all these stories about women being abused just for being women, and that the white heterosexual man is the most harmful thing a woman can have in her life, and that everything can be fixed with a little course on building masculinity, and that everything can be fixed with a feminism class in schools or with a comprehensive sex education class. It automatically falls apart. It's absolutely useless and only ends up making things worse. Literally.
The other day, some statistics came out about polarization among young people. Children or young teenagers who are in high schools and universities are becoming more and more polarized towards the right, let's say, towards that more reactionary discourse, to call it somehow more conservative, more old-fashioned. And women do remain quite aligned with the feminist narrative, creating, as redundant as it may sound, a polarization that inevitably has very serious demographic consequences. If it were me, I would have answered my question about the greatest harm feminism has caused in society. Would I tell you that it's the separation of understanding between men and women? I think that's something extremely serious. You're absolutely right about everything you've said, Valentina, regarding that whole speech about the patriarchy and so on. But I see it more because that kind of speech creates an intrinsic hatred in women towards men, and also because it puts us men completely on the defensive with women. And in a society where men and women don't understand each other, will it stop being a society at some point? And
There's a lot of truth in that. Because after all, what we see in feminism is that policies are built, theory is built, and culture is built based on trauma. The 4B movement that started in Korea in 2017, the 4B movement has some premises. These are no relationships, marriage, intimacy with men, or having children. And actually, when I saw Julia Salander making a video defending the 4B movement, and one of the things they said is there's no harm in doing this. Because what we're saying is, until they change the rules of the game, we're not willing to play. I mean, the thing is, are you starting from the point that you really understand what the game is and what the rules are? Are you basing it on your own idea? How would I know? Obviously, there will be women who have suffered a traumatic situation with a particular man at some point. Considering that less than 1% of the population commits these terrible crimes, I mean, are men who are capable of doing something like that to a woman really just a tiny minority? Absolutely. And even so, after living through that experience, are you extrapolating that generalization to all men and deciding to distance yourself from all men because of what you went through? Are you turning your individual trauma into the rule, based on which we should build policies and interact with each other? This is the same as refusing to play a board game with all of humanity because you played with someone who cheated. It doesn't work like that. We can't fully communicate
of
this way. And that's why I always let you know, right? Like, we have to avoid suffering the same fate. We have to try to prevent this from happening to us too. Why feminists? One harm feminism has done to women is collectivizing us, to hijack the ideals of women and try to represent women as a whole. Feminists don't represent women. They represent themselves, in any case. There are a lot of us women who don't feel addressed by that discourse, and we can't allow them to have that authority. I mean, men see that feminism has messed up the minds of a lot of girls, a lot of young women. They have to give us the chance. They have to give the chance to see that all women are not represented there. And more women are daring to show their rejection and disapproval of these trends. Cassie J made the documentary Red Pill, which I assume you've seen. If not, I recommend it given your channel's name. She said a phrase in her technology, entertainment, design talk that really stuck with me and that I felt very identified with. She began making her documentary as a feminist but changed her mind during the process. And she said, when you dare to humanize your enemy, in quotes, men, you will be dehumanized by your community. So, the women who dare to change their minds will be systematically attacked by all the women who are still co-opted by the cult of feminism. It is.
Is it true, Valen, one thing? Having this conversation, I've come to a conclusion, and it's actually quite revealing. And it's that really, in all the political debate today, political, social, cultural, even religious, we are constantly dehumanizing those people with whom we don't agree ideologically. And it's something I'm not exempt from either, but every now and then I fall into empathy. I'm more empathetic than people might think. No, and I really remember that my fight is not to humiliate the people who believe in these ideas, but to try to rescue them and bring them into the light or the truth. And I realized that they really dehumanize me. They believe it and they dehumanize us men. Muslims are often dehumanized and wrongly portrayed as terrorists, which isn't true. It happens with absolutely everything. Well,
That's what I always say. We don't like to admit it, right? Why are rapists? Why do they do it? Because they're men? Wait, most men aren't rapists? This is like saying most cancer patients are elderly, so most elderly people are cancer patients. No, that's it. Most of them are. But not every seat is a chair, so we have
that
avoid falling into those traps because obviously, yes, maybe you say, well, of the percentage of sexual abuses, such a large amount is perpetrated by Muslims, let's say, but most Muslims are not committing those abuses. It's good to make those distinctions.
me. And you know what? Sorry, what do I have? The reflection also ended by saying that if you dehumanize an ideological opponent or a person you don't compete with, you share certain points of view. At the end of the day, you're in your own head, prepared and justifying any harm that happens to them, whether it's physical or moral. And a person who wishes harm on someone else is not okay. You can wish for certain ideas not to succeed, but not for people to be harmed. Not for people.
Absolutely. And no one is going to turn around. No one is going to redeem themselves. No one is going to dare to retract. If what they see from the other side is that we're just waiting for them to come in vulnerability and peace so we can shoot them. It's the same with Incluso. We don't share this position, right? What about a woman who spent her life on OnlyFans? That's fine. You're absolutely entitled not to marry her, but did you realize you didn't like that? Great, look, it's fine. Everyone has the right to. This is what Christ used to say, right? I mean, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Everyone has the right to redemption. Everyone has the right to change their mind. Everyone has the right to make and admit mistakes. And to be able to change, as long as there is that willingness to improve, to build, to realize the mistakes one has made. I mean, oh, well, at one point you did such a thing, so that's it, you deserve the worst. No, wait, no.
You deserve the worst. On the contrary, totally. Many people in the comments say the one who forgives died on the cross. I do advocate for redemption, but I also encourage men to become people who have plenty of options so they don't have to settle for a girl who has her private parts on the internet. But at the end of the day, I do believe in forgiveness, but it's a big moral debate for me. Many people ask me, Valentina, can you imagine my face? It's just that I've met this girl. She's really nice, but of course, she slept with about 50 guys or so, he told me, and I was like, damn, it's
a number, sure, but wow.
My friend, what do you want me to say? What would I do? If you were in my position, I'm also telling you that I can't give you advice from my position, from yours. You have to do it. I don't dare. First,
do you define your values? What are my priorities and needs? What is something non-negotiable for me in a relationship? Let's see. She slept with 50 guys. We're not going to use that same example, but how old is she? I mean, she's 40 years old and slept with 50 guys, or even if she's 70. No, but listen to me. She's 50 years old and slept with 50 guys. From 20 to 35 and from 35 to 50, she was extremely chaste. Well, she's showing you that in the last years of her life, she clearly had a very different way of seeing the world compared to her earlier years. So you're saying the guy in his 50s slept with her just yesterday, and maybe that gives you... I can understand it, but it's the same thing. It depends on what your priorities are, your values, what you want to stand up for. What I can't say is, well, like, I don't want to be with someone who slept with 50 guys, which is perfectly legitimate. So does that mean you don't deserve love? Well, maybe from someone powerful, that's it.
That's a completely different thing. Yeah, that's the point. What I tell women is that usually the men who won't care about that are men who are in need of love and affection. They have many options. So, well, for every action, there's a reaction. For every act, there is a consequence. And you should know that the acts of sleeping with 50 guys, one of the consequences is that the men who are, let's say, of higher value or the most valuable, unfortunately, generally won't even look at you. And
Value is defined by what each person assigns to themselves and others. That's why it's called value.
yes, I don't think it's that subjective when it comes to it. I think men generally value certain kinds of things and women value other kinds of things. Obviously, generally speaking, yes, of course. Watch out for market value. That's something we red pillars have. Well, I'm not totally a red pillar. I'm actually more conservative than red pillar. I've realized there are a lot of things about the red pill that don't quite fit with me. I don't like them. But unfortunately, I'd have to say yes. Relationship values between the sexes are, in my opinion, fairly well defined. And as I mentioned to you before, behind the scenes, even feminists themselves still value the masculine attributes of men. In fact, do you know anecdote about the national police officer who infiltrated the Catalan CDRs? Oh yes, 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 the real alpha male
National police?
with a body sculpted by Michelangelo infiltrates among the Ovacudas. See, I'm already dehumanizing them. And he slept with like 4 of them doing
A big
service for Spain. Ultimately, it's about the story. But those
same girls?
reported him for rape. They said,
No, I feel deceived. I know it was rape. Of course, because those women, that type of woman, would never want to go out with a guy who fits the requirements they reject. Maybe for a quick hookup and all that, it's fantastic. But they can't see themselves with someone like that in the long term because they would systematically feel judged for who they are. So that's when you say yes. Obviously, there are some general dynamics and general preferences between men and women. But in the world, we've seen that there's everything. So, will there be people who can also be found within those exceptions? That's where I think, I don't know. The other day, people tell me this a lot. Jota. The other day, I found a comment on Twitter that said to me, I wouldn't want to marry you because you're used. They said that to you? Well, that's fine. I wouldn't marry you either. Don't worry. Don't feel any pressure. I don't feel it either. Find the person who is right for you, and I'll find the person who is right for me. That's it. There's no need to suffer. No,
people don't get it, and it's totally unnecessary. Some comments are just unbelievable. One time someone told me, are you a beta because your wife isn't a virgin? Damn, man.
Of course.
I'll also tell you that there's a pretty radicalized faction, and it scares me sometimes. I mean, damn. I want this message to be educational. And we have to
avoid it. I mean, what I always say about feminists is, because there's always the feminist who says, well, but I don't think that. Well, that's fine. But silence gives consent. That is one of the main problems with how feminism has evolved, is that within feminism itself, the absolute atrocities that have been committed have not been called out. They've been covered up, so it's good we can say, no, within our perspective, there are factions
that have become radicalized,
that crossover. I mean,
that go overboard. Totally, they go way too far. Valen, it's been a pleasure having you here, really. For those who don't know, her channel is called Valence Entropy. I'll leave the link in the description. And I hope you really enjoyed the show. Valen, do you want to say anything to the audience before we go? Nothing.
Thank you so much. Nothing else for listening to me. Okay.
Well, guys, for anyone who wants to see the exclusive segment with Valen, you already know you have the link in the pinned comment. See you in another episode of La Factoria. A big hug to everyone. Everyone.